If you're buying a home this year, you might notice something new. Your agent will ask you to sign a buyer representation agreement before showing homes. It's the law now, and I want to explain why it's required and what it actually means for you as a buyer. So for many years, when a seller listed their home, they typically offered compensation to the buyer's agent, and it was listed very clearly in the MLS. Because of that system, buyers rarely had to think about how their agent was getting paid. They just got paid. But after a series of antitrust lawsuits involving the National Association of Realtors, the rules around commissions drastically changed. And one of the biggest changes is that the buyer agent compensation can no longer be advertised in the MLS. So it became less transparent. So because of that change, agents are now required to have in place upfront a written buyer representation agreement before touring homes. But there's another important piece of this that people don't always realize. Real estate is one of the only professions where someone works for free until the very last day, your closing day. A realtor may spend weeks or even months, show 65 plus homes, research the properties, negotiate offers, coordinate inspections, work through attorney review, and help you navigate the entire process. But they don't get paid until the transaction closes. And if you never buy a house, you owe your realtor nothing. So that's a lot of work done on faith and trust. So realtors are going to be fully committed to helping you find the right home and guiding you through the process. And signing an extended buyer representation agreement shows that you are committed to them as well. Now, these agreements are very flexible. Everything is negotiable. For example, you could sign a one property showing agreement, a short-term agreement while you're actively searching and figuring out if you like each other, or a longer buyer agency agreement if you plan to work with that agent throughout your entire home search. Another reason these agreements exist is something called procuring cause. Let's say a realtor spends time showing you homes, researching properties, and helping you find the one that you love. Then suddenly, you decide to have your cousin, who just happens to get his license and be a part-time realtor, write the offer. Without a buyer representation agreement in place, the realtor who originally did the work could end up with no protection for their time and effort. That's not fair to them, and it's bad karma. The agreement simply protects the professional relationship between the buyer and the agent who is helping them. Now, a lot of people want to know how the commission side of this works today, so I'll explain it. In my experience, not much has actually changed since the class action lawsuit, except it's not in the MLS anymore. Sellers are still frequently contributing towards the buyer's agent commission. The difference is that it's just not displayed the same way that it used to be. So here in Illinois, our standard purchase contract includes a section on page 1 where the buyer can request that the seller contributes towards the buyer agency compensation as part of the offer negotiation. It's very clear. Interestingly, national data shows that commissions haven't gone down like expected. According to reports from Redfin and the industry, the average real estate commission has actually ticked upward overall. So now it's around 5.3% overall, and before it was 5.1%. So despite all the headlines, and the day-to-day processes for buyers haven't really dramatically changed like people thought. So I'm going to give you a real-life example using strawberries as payment, because who doesn't love strawberries? So let's say you have a realtor, she is your buyer's agent, and you agreed on the contract, on your buyer's representation agreement, to pay her 2 strawberries. Okay? And then the seller, on the contract, you say, I would like you to pay my realtor 2 strawberries. The seller might say, I only want to pay your realtor 1 strawberry. So then your agreement with your realtor is 2 strawberries. So you as the buyer are going to have to give your realtor an extra 1 strawberry. So that's the difference. The seller doesn't have to agree to pay the buyer anything or the buyer's agent anything. That was the point of the lawsuit. Okay. Things haven't really changed to where I'm working. The seller is usually still contributing to that. But you have to understand, as a buyer, if the seller says, I'm not paying any strawberries to your realtor, your agreement says you would pay them 2 strawberries. So you have to be prepared for that. Or you could find a different house where that seller is paying the realtor strawberries. That helps explain it in somewhat real life terms. The biggest difference you'll see is that buyer representation agreements are now required upfront, which creates transparency and clear expectations for everyone involved. And honestly, that's not a bad thing. When a buyer and a realtor are both committed to working together, it usually leads to a much smoother home buying experience and home buying process. If you're thinking about buying a home and have questions how these new rules affect you, feel free to reach out, and I'm always happy to help out. I know realtor commission can be a confusing topic. Everyone thinks we make a ton of money, but at the end of the day, we have splits, there's team splits, we have taxes, we don't get health insurance through our company, so we're usually self-insured, so we get a smaller percentage of what seems like a very big check. But I'm here to make it easy for you. So if you have a question about how it all works, or you're thinking about being a realtor and you just want to pick my brain, go ahead and message me. If this was helpful, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.